So what's up, everybody? My name is Devin Martinez. I'm with the AskOzzie.com real estate team. I'm also with the Grid Investor Network, where we're head of the franchise here in the Houston area. We have this meeting every first Tuesday of the month at 6:30. The first hour, we always have speakers like Ricky is today, and then afterwards we just hash it up. So we got a small crowd in person tonight, and we have a lot of people online. So anybody that's online, please feel free to put your questions in at the end. Ricky, anybody in the room, you ask away. And so moving forward today, we're talking about negotiating and identifying motivated sellers. Before we start, we actually have a sponsor today, Derek Stout. I'm going to bring him up. He's going to talk, and then after that, we'll introduce our speaker. So give it up to Derek.
Thank you. I guess I need to stay right here.
Yeah.
You
can move back and forth. You're good. You're
Yeah.
perfect. You're like right between those two signs.
All right, that'll work. So first of all, I just want to thank the whole Ozzie team, because typically I do about 20 or 30 open houses on a weekend when I'm not working. And so to be able to come into a group that's already here on maybe one trip is phenomenal. So I'm totally appreciative of what I'm allowed to do with this. So I'm Derek, my business, I have my flyer, my business card is attached to it. I have a little bit of information on there. Basically what I'm all about is trying to take communication and customer service and marry them together. What I want to do is take the client that's always nervous, which is kind of strange to me. I think about this a lot. I think it's weird that the client that's buying the house is nervous about my inspection. Really, the seller, when I walk in, should be scared, right? They should be the ones that are nervous, because I'm always trying to calm the client down. Look, everything's going to be fine. I've had clients call me the night before. Oh, Derek, I don't think I could sleep. This is the house of our dreams. I'm like, no, hold up. We're going to walk through whatever I find. Everything is fixable. And now we're walking into this. It's almost a buyer's market, so to speak. It's getting really there. Where you actually have sellers concessions at this point. But yeah, everything is doable. Everything's fixable, and things are negotiable at this point. And so that's what I try to do. That's my main focus, is try to get the client to just remain calm the whole process. I have there's certain things that I bring to the table. So for example, what do you think the two most requested questions I get out of agents? What do you think the two top ones are?
Don't scare my clients.
Don't scare. That's number 3.
How much is it?
There you go. What are your rates? My rates are very fair. Like, for an example, 1,500 square foot is $325. Every 500 square feet is just $50 more. $50 more. I don't charge for sprinklers. I don't charge for thermal imaging camera. You'll see a picture of the camera on the flyer. I charge for pools, but I charge $50. It doesn't really tax me much. It does take a little bit of effort and a little bit more time, so I do charge a little bit for that. So how much do you charge? What do you think the other one is? Yeah. Oh, you weren't ready.
No, sorry.
What do you think the other question is that I get the most? Any guesses?
What's your schedule looks like?
That's a good one, and I get that a lot. But more than that,
How in detail do you go?
not that, but I
The
do get
date?
detail.
Availability?
That's almost like scheduled,
I'm
but
asking.
I think I know.
there you go, the turnaround.
Turnaround.
So my turnaround, I've designed my turnaround based on 6 to 8 months ago. When it was 1 to 3 day option periods, I didn't have time to do the old school style where it's 24 hours or 48 hours returning a report. Can't do that. When you have a 1 day option period, you remember how crazy that was? Not only did I need to provide a report on site, or at least that very day, within a couple of hours of the inspection, I had to have contractors that were ready to go. So I did that. I learned how to do it. It's not that complicated. So I got very efficient at what I was doing. And then I just didn't stop doing it. It just made sense to keep going with that pattern because it's easy. It's not really that hard. It's not that complicated. So my prices are fair. They're very competitive. And my turnaround is extremely fast.
Can you remind the prices one more time?
I'm sorry.
Can you repeat the prices? one more time?
So my base price at 1,500 square feet and below is $325, and so for every 500 square feet is $50. It's simple math and everything. That's good for me on the phone. Because whenever they call me, I'm in the middle of something, it's like, okay, 50. So that's how I do that. So, and that's what I'm about. My business is all about communication, customer service, providing a good quality inspection, getting a good turnaround, fair prices, and just walking the client through. I really prefer the client at the very end of the inspection to show up. If they want to show up during the inspection, that's fine too. But I get laser focused if they show up at the end of it, and then we can walk through the process. If for whatever reason, and it does happen, some of the times I can't get the report written on site when they show up, I have a tablet, and we go through all the pictures. And a lot of clients prefer that. They prefer seeing the pictures because the report, if they've never seen it before, is kind of distracting. It has a lot of different colors and all that. So we go through the pictures, and while they're on site, I can take them, if they have any questions, let's go take a look at it. Let me show you exactly what I'm seeing. And so then I show them a mock-up of what an inspection looks like. It has color codes, descriptions, arrows, and all that. And so then whenever they go home and I email them the inspection report, everything makes sense, right? So it's all about that customer service communication thing. If there's any questions, I deal with it. If there's any issues, we work it out. And just staying with them and making sure that they're okay and that there's no problem, right? And so that's what the business is all about. That's how I separate myself, so to speak, from others. And so with that, I don't want to.
Well, what other processes do you go through with investors? We're gonna talk about investment.
Okay, that's a great question. Since this is mostly an investors type of setting. So whenever investors call me, they usually call me and they don't have a whole lot of time. And they say, I need the top 5, right? The foundation, roof, AC, plumbing, and electrical. So I go in and I do a quick inspection. It's not a thorough inspection. And I cut my rate completely in half. Because I'm not doing a full inspection, right? And so I'm able to get on the phone and I tell them, this is the value of your house. Not really the value, but this is what I'm determining about your house based on the top 5, the really big ticket item. And then they can decide if they want to pull the trigger on that investment right then and there. And so I cut the rate right in half and it's very fast. And then I write the report later because they just need a phone call saying yes or no. What's the deal?
What does the eval look like on those different mechanical features? Are you measuring stuff or are you just saying, this is definitely gonna need some repairs?
Well, it's a thorough inspection. I test the system. So like the AC or the furnace or whatever it is, I run it to its maximum potential. The electrical, I turn on all the lights, I run the AC, I turn everything on, I make sure, and I open the panel, I look at everything, I do thermal imaging, the whole night. It's a quicker inspection because I'm not opening windows, shutting doors, and all that stuff. Yeah, it's a quicker inspection, but it's still an extremely thorough inspection. Yeah.
Sometimes the business don't have lights, water, or any other utilities.
Yes.
What do you do in that case?
So there have been times when I show up at the property and the water's turned off. And so I call the client and I call the agent, I say, look, this is what I can do right now. Do you want me to proceed with it or do you want me to come back later? Usually I'll do a re-inspect fee as long as it's charged to the seller. As far as like a rental or an investment property, there's all those involved in that too. It's no different. I'll contact you. They don't have this and that on. I'll do everything I can while I'm here. I can't pressure test your plumbing right now. So what can we do? Do you want me to come back or do you want me to do this and then come back later? Who do we need to get involved in to turn everything on that needs to be turned on? Absolutely, that's a great question. I run into that quite often, actually. Especially with open house.
So I have your number and everything put in here. We have your website and everything on there for everybody in the virtual everywhere. So thanks, Derek.
You're welcome. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. So, just to let y'all know exactly what Grid is just an investor network. We're nationwide. This is our hub here in Houston. So again, we meet every first Tuesday of the month. We have speakers. We usually have a lot of, investors, contractors, hard money, pretty much anything that has to do with investing, realtors, everything is under this roof. As I said, tonight we have a little bit of a small, I'm glad we filled up all the seats. But after this, after Ricky speaks, let's all get together. The point of this is that it's a free networking event. We're not here to pitch you anything. We're not here to give you like, try to get you to buy some service. This is literally just free training for real estate investors. And for the investor that's here, today we have a lot of network guys and these guys are here to bring value. And I recommend that you talk to some of these guys afterwards because they are going to have some really valuable stuff to offer and let you know and help anybody that's wanting to get into investing. I know that when I first got into wholesaling and into fixing and flipping, I had a contact at Network, I had a contact at the other ones, and these guys know their stuff, they know what they're talking about. If you want to learn some stuff, these are some good guys to pick their mind. So we have access to them today. Hopefully y'all guys can come every month and check it out and see the other speakers we have. So without further ado, I got Mr. Ricky Sparks here. He is the man, the myth, the legend, the broker over at Network. So let's give it up for him.
Obviously, thank you for showing up today. Needed to point out that I misspelled grid on my very first slide. There's only one D in grid. Also, I am not a guru. I am not a public speaker. I'm a real estate broker who wholesales investment property every single day. Today we're going to talk about how to identify and negotiate with motivated sellers and what factors create motivation and how you can help motivated sellers solve their problem for profit. Just a little bit about me. I've been with Network Realty for 16 years, which is pretty crazy. Graduated from Texas A&M in 2006. Born in Corpus. I own about 47 rental properties. I've probably done 1,000 plus real estate transactions sometime in 2022. Did my 1,000th transaction. I don't tend to do very many flips. If I do, it's because I couldn't handle it as a wholesale deal and I got to flip it, or it was something that I didn't want to add to my rental portfolio. I am a big believer in the buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat method, the BRRRR method. The cash flow pays for the bills, but the appreciation pays for the generational wealth that you can pass down to your family. So I'm huge believer in that. So my approach to this is really, really simple. I don't think that there's like some secret process to negotiate or navigate motivated sellers. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of numbers. I know, looking throughout the room, and I'm sure on the broadcast, the Zoom, there's multiple investors, wholesalers, realtors, mortgage brokers, and there's not a secret sauce to this. It's a matter of getting out there and applying these simple concepts probably consistently, which leads to success. So the first thing I'm going to jump right into is that, in all honesty, you're not going to win every single one of these battles. You're not going to be able to buy every single house that you go out to. That's kind of an important concept to grasp, that you can't win every single one. I've never been super salesy to the point where I'm going to convince somebody to sell me their property. I might be able to build enough rapport and educate them on the process to where they feel more comfortable in purchasing or selling a property. But very rarely have I been the guy that has convinced somebody to sell a property. So I think realizing that you're not always going to be the best fit might be the one thing that I would take from this, because the other concepts are going to be really, really simple. I think it's really important. I'm going to touch on it multiple times throughout these slides, that you need to build your network, and you need to be able to utilize your network to help people out, to bring value to any and all situations. And you'd be surprised how often that deal will come back to you if you approach it the right way, and or the referrals that come from it, right? So it's not uncommon for me, having been doing this for a minute, that I'll get a referral or a recommendation from somebody from 5 years ago, from 6 years ago, from somebody where I didn't even buy the house, but I treated it the right way, I handled it professionally, presented the information appropriately, and they felt that they could pass along my contact information and trust that I was going to treat that next client, potential client, the exact same way. So, and by all means, I assume this could be conversational. We can have questions and talk about it, but if y'all have questions, speak up. Otherwise, I'll just run through. So defining a motivated seller or what a motivated seller is. Motivated sellers are people who want or need to sell and may be willing to sell their property at a discount to a buyer who can close fast with minimal contract contingencies. Now, that being said, a motivated seller typically is one of two things. It's a distressed property, right? Or it could be a distressed property. It could be one of these two things or both of these things. It's dated, it needs updates, maybe to be a little bit more modern. You know, we've all walked houses that look like 1978, but they're in pristine condition, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's livable, it can pass all the inspections, and it could sell conventionally. You know, in certain markets and not necessarily in Houston, maybe not today necessarily in Houston, would you be buying that at market value as an investor, to then turn around and upsell it for a considerable upcharge? That doesn't happen a whole lot in our market. You know, across the country, I know in Denver, I know in Charlotte, I know in our Phoenix offices, they're able to buy stuff off the MLS. It's in pretty good shape. It just needs to be repaired, and they're able to upsell it, you know, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, but their refunds are extensive, right? $150,000, $200,000. So a dated property is an example of that. It might need new paint, flooring, countertops, backsplashes, and appliances. Those are all very, very simple fixes. And in all honesty, a seller should probably do those things on their own, right? We all know a great tile person. We all know a great vinyl plank installer. We all know a great painter, sheetrocker. That stuff is easy to get. If you don't have that, that's something that we can provide to a potential seller to help them out of that situation that they might be in, or just have them acknowledge that, hey, maybe you shouldn't be selling this to an investor. You should be selling this to an end buyer instead. What we as investors are really looking for is mechanical issues, right? What Derek was talking about, the foundation, the roof, the electrical, the plumbing, the HVAC. So it has a major mechanical flaw, an issue with the functionality of the house to live comfortably and would not pass a conventional inspection. That's important, right? And that's why it's important to have an inspector on your side, to be able to at least educate yourself and understand those processes and know what wouldn't qualify for a conventional mortgage. When you know those things, now you have a little bit of ammo in your arsenal to talk to a seller and talk to them with the knowledge and educate them on why they need to sell it to an investor, as opposed to listing it with the realtor, right? You know, one of the first conversations that I have, and I think I get to this later, but I'm going to it now, is, man, if you want to make the most money, you should just sell it with a realtor, right? You should list it out on the MLS, and you should try and get the most money possible. Does that mean they make the most money? Not necessarily. But if they want to sell it for the most money, period, probably listing it with a real estate agent and trying to get a highest and best offer is something that they should do. I know we don't do this very often, and but occasionally we'll close on something and relist it just to see what the market would be willing to bear, just to see what an investor would be willing to pay for something with one of those major mechanical flaws. So one of the first things that I'm doing in my initial conversation over the phone is helping the seller acknowledge that, yes, my property is good enough to sell conventionally, or no, my property is not good enough to sell conventionally, and it needs to sell to an investor. That's probably one of the biggest like sales tactics that I use when I'm speaking with a potential seller, is educating them on those two differences and why I can be of service, or maybe why I can't be of service. Distressed seller, this is a little bit different. So we have a distressed property and a distressed seller, right? There can be both, which I'll get to in a minute, but a distressed seller needs the funds as soon as possible for a specific reason. That can be for a divorce, death, probate, heirship issues. It can be a vacant property, a vacant rental, for instance, is a big one that we target often. They could be moving to a different state or even just across town. It could be something simple like that. It could be sickness. They could need the funds for another purchase. It could be an investor who no longer wants the asset, right? It could be an investor who got in over their head, or someone like me who just says, screw it, I'm done with this effing property. I don't want to touch it anymore. Please take it off my hands. And believe it or not, that happens. That's real life. When you deal with a lot of properties, that's real life. So there's a bunch of reasons why, this is barely touching on why a seller would potentially need to sell quickly. It is important to identify why they need to sell though, to see if you can be of service to them or to know how to direct the conversation so that you can add value in their particular situation. Yes, sir.
Are there open-ended questions that you think you ask more often than normal to get kind of responses back without saying?
The easiest one that I do pretty much every single time is just straight up asking them why they're looking to sell. Right, it's very, very simple. The correspondence that you have with these sellers doesn't have to be an hour and a half over the phone. This can be a 5 to 10 minute conversation, get what you need out of it, because in all actuality, it's very unlikely that you sell yourself well enough to the seller to convince them to sign a contract over the phone off that initial conversation, right? It's like the dating world. You're rarely going to marry somebody just from a phone conversation. This is a major transaction in this person's life. This might be one of the only houses they ever sell. They're not going to make that decision until they get to meet you. So it's really important that we get in front of these people. So I try and make the conversation somewhat concise and to the point, and to try and get in front of them. I think that's the best way to say it. Okay. A motivated seller who has a distressed property and is unwilling or unable to make the repairs is likely to sell to an investor who is willing to spend the money on the repairs. So I know that's a really simple concept, but if the house is messed up and distressed and it needs work done to it, but the seller has the ability to make the repairs because they have the money and they know how to fix it up, they don't need you, right? You need to kind of push them in that direction. And oftentimes that's one of the first things that I'm asking. Almost assuming, some foreign people, you can get this done. You should just get this done so you can sell it for more money. A lot of people acknowledge, one, they don't know those people, and two, they just don't want to put up with it. That's when you kind of start to identify that someone is actually motivated to sell to an investor at 50 to 60 cents on a dollar, or whatever number you're offering. On the flip side of that, a motivated seller who is a distressed seller does not have time and or funds to remedy their problem, not related to that particular property, and are likely to sell to an investor. So in the same sense, if they have the time available and they're not distressed, then they should take the time to remedy the issues with the property and sell it conventionally, right? So identifying those two things, I know it seems overly simple, but letting the sellers acknowledge that they're one of those two things for both is a huge win on our side as investors, and having these potential sellers realize that you can truly help them out. So a motivated seller who has a distressed property and a property that's in need of major repairs would be even more motivated to sell to an investor. That's saying they're both, right? They're had a death in the family and the house needs a ton of repairs to it. That would be a highly motivated individual to get that done. So if you have the ability to pull those lists, to do that kind of data research and all the different resources that investors have, and that's probably a completely different conversation. And I recommend doing that and see if you can cross-reference some of those things to find some highly motivated individuals. In the same sense, though, you'd be surprised if you were just to drive down the block and get 10 houses on one block all in a row. One of them's bound to have some kind of issue. So there's never a reason not to ask the question. Time is money. Our efforts are money. It costs money to pull those lists. It costs money to pull contact information, to skip trace. It is time is money. So I would focus in on where people would be interested in selling, but even if not, just shot in the dark, like everybody in this room has the ability to go find one of these deals just by blind luck, by finding the right person at the right time. And that's something that I'm not going to get into here, but now that I brought it up, it's about timing. It's really, really easy for somebody to be too busy or to be running to soccer practice and they can't handle that phone call right at the moment for whatever reason. And they could have been both of these things, a motivated seller with a distressed property. And if you called at the wrong time, you would never know that. if we reach out to that person enough times, right, enough touches is what we say in our office, eventually you'll find them at the right place at the right time. Okay, jumping into leads, right? And identifying the lead over the phone. So I'm gonna go through an inbound lead, probably brought from your marketing that you've done. Once again, it's a completely different conversation. So I'm not gonna dive into that too much. And I'm also gonna go to outbound approach where we're essentially cold calling, trying to find out if someone is a distressed seller. So the incoming warm lead. They call off your advertising or from word of mouth, which word of mouth would probably be the greatest tool, right? When someone's referring you out, that tends to be a much easier conversation. They're wanting to sell their house. You know that they called you, they want to sell their house, right? They're calling you asking to see if you would be interested in buying their property. Even though they called you to ask you, it's very important that that question or that point comes out that they are interested in selling the property. If they don't ask you straight up, hey, I got your advertising, right? You were referred by this person. Would you be interested in buying my house? You kind of have to ask them if they're interested in selling their house. If we want to push this conversation forward and give ourselves a chance to take the next step, which is probably proving your worth over the phone and then setting an appointment to get in front of these people at the property, and then to be able to have the chance to submit the offer and negotiate. So it seems like a simple concept, but actually asking that question to be sure the individual is looking to sell. If they called you, you already know, but it's nice to get a yes on the call. Once again, a different conversation, and Ozzie's great with this. I wish Ozzie was here to talk about this, but you know, having these phone conversations and being able to get small wins in the conversation and having some yeses, some positivity makes the conversations flow much better and kind of opens everybody up a little bit. So getting any kind of yes at the beginning of that conversation is a good thing. Tell them you're an investor buyer who buys distressed properties and can close quickly. Why are you looking to sell your house? Once again, these people might not need to sell their house. It's important that you acknowledge or have these people acknowledge themselves why they're calling you. Why are they looking to sell that property? When they identify the reason, you know they're acknowledging the issue at hand, and you are now going to help them find a solution. And that's your job as a real estate investor or a wholesaler or whatever your profession is here in the investment game. It's to find a way to help these people out and realize that if this one doesn't work, maybe the next one will, or the person they refer you to will. You can't buy every house, but you can definitely try. You know, one of the things that we talk about in our office is we submit an offer on every single property that we walk, right? We're going to spend the time and the effort and the advertising to go to the property and you know, really educate these people. We're submitting an offer. We might not buy the damn thing, but we're going to educate and we're going to submit the offer because you never know. You know, it just happened to me today where I got told straight up with the offer, no, not going to happen. I mean, just a couple of hours later, they must have had a conversation with a friend or a family member and decided the exact opposite of that. So that's why you always submit the offer despite the conditions. If you've done all this stuff, if you've qualified it, if you've educated and you got all the right responses, why not submit the offer? Once again, that's a pretty simple concept. Can't buy every house, but we can definitely try. If nothing else, we can point them in the right direction. And it's really important to use your network to help build your own network, right? So utilizing contractors, realtors, short sale agents, mortgage brokers, title companies, inspectors. It's really, really important to know all these people, have them saved in your phone, right? If you met Derek today and you don't have a home inspector in your phone, you're foolish if you don't save that name and number in your phone right now. Right, because then you're going to post on social media, hey, does anybody have a home inspector? Is that person more likely to help you out, or the person who's handing you shirt at a meeting like this? So once again, very, very simple concept, building network. Okay, the outbound approach, a little bit more complicated, but probably a lot more similar than you would think. The only difference is it's not as warm of a lead, and your job on the initial conversation is to turn that into a warmer conversation than the outbound phone call, right? So if we are reaching out to a landlord who owns a property. We know he's a landlord, right? Whether we determine that he's an absentee owner through the tax records, or there's a for rent sign in his front yard with his phone number on it. You know, it seems very simple, but you gotta make that phone call, and hopefully you're making that phone call as you're driving down the street. We are trying to turn that conversation into something that other people want. Be direct and don't beat around the bush. Realize that no one wants to be on the other end of a sales call, right? Like everybody in this room got a spam call today. I'm weird. I pick up every single call. It's probably just because it was ingrained in me from the time I started in real estate. And my phone number is absolutely everywhere, so I can't get away from it. But I pick up every single one. And I tend to kind of mess with them a little bit. In fact, I talk a lot to VAs because I have a bunch of rental properties. And it's unbelievable the amount of VAs that don't pass along my contact information to whoever they're working for. But anyways, be direct. No one loves the sales call. Unless you're me and you're trying to screw with people. But be direct and don't beat around the bush. So I'm pretty matter of fact. Hello, I'm Rick Sparks. I was reaching out because I'm trying to purchase another investment property in the neighborhood. Important to know, it's important, this is the sidebar, important to know what area, neighborhood you're calling about so you can sound credible, right? If you don't know the subdivision you're in, if you don't know the street you're on, stop. Look at Google Maps, cycle the street you're on. Sound like you actually care about it. It goes a long way, I promise. So I'm looking to buy another investment property in the neighborhood and was wondering if you'd be interested in a cash offer to purchase your property. Right? I'm not, and once again, I wish Ozzie was here to talk about these cold calls and calling people because I think he's really good at it. But I'm not sitting there trying to build a ton of rapport with somebody I don't know, for somebody who's not expecting my phone call, right? If they're expecting my phone call because I've been referred and it's warm, it's an easy conversation. We can kind of BS back and forth. If it's not, if it's truly a cold call, I'm not trying to find out how their day's going. You know, how about the weather today? Like, I'm not trying any icebreakers either. I'm trying to get right to the point. I'm also trying to prove that I'm real. Not that there's anything wrong with the VA, because a lot of us make a lot of money off of VAs, but I'm real, right? I'm the guy that signs on the dotted line. I'm the guy that sends the money to the title company. You're talking to the real guy. Let me inform you of that by getting right to the point. I don't respond until I get a response from that initial question. Would you be interested in a cash offer for your property? You can tell a lot by the pause. You can tell a lot by the initial reaction of that potential seller to see if they'd be interested in it. And we've all made the cold call and then immediately shut down, right? I'm a pro, done this thousands of times, and I promise you, I've been shut down more than everybody in this room combined, right? It happens, unfortunately. That's okay though, to me, I'm still okay with that because now I can move on to my next potential lead, my next target, the next house on the block that I think might be a good investment opportunity. Their tone will tell you whether they're interested or not. The tone will tell you whether they're interested or not. If they're interested, press on with the incoming warm lead approach. So basically just back to the pitch that I had at the beginning, basically explaining you're an investor buyer, you can close quickly. Why are you looking to sell a house? You still have all, you don't know these people, you can ask them that question. You know, if I'm the seller and I get this call all the time and I'm talking to these people, they're not asking the pertinent, like, they just want to know the exact number. Do I have a price in mind? I get it. We all want that number. I would love to get a number from every single seller over the phone, but I'm savvy. Right? I know there's other savvy people in this room. You're not giving away that number if you know what you're doing. And so I'm trying to prove my worth. I'm trying to explain what I'm trying to accomplish. And we're trying to get to see if there's some middle ground, to see if there's an opportunity for us to make it a win-win for both parties. Don't respond until you get a response. So I like to wait. Their tone will tell you if they're interested. Obviously, we follow through with that one lead approach. If they are not, then apologize and ask if they know anyone else looking to sell. You'd be super surprised how many people say, yeah, the a-hole around the corner, he's looking to sell his house. Why don't you give him a call, right? They're going to give you the address. You have no idea what these people are going to say. You know, you did nothing but prove that you're a real person and ask a poignant question. You got shut down, but you can always ask for another lead. The worst thing that happens is they say no, right? And we move on to the next one. But I guarantee you won't get another lead from that individual if you don't ask. Very rarely, well, I guess it happens occasionally, but you might as well ask for another opportunity. I would say it's your day and you should buy a lottery ticket. When they say no, but you should call my brother-in-law. Here's his phone number. He's looking to sell, which that happens. You just enough to make enough calls. It will happen. This is successful negotiation. Both parties get what they need from the dispute or the agreement. Super important. You know, this business is fun and easy and you build your network really fast when it's a win-win. Right? It's not just, hey, let me buy this house from you for $10 and I'm gonna make $1 million flipping it. It's how do we make this a win-win for both of us? Negotiating with sellers ahead of time, asking the sellers in the initial outreach, if I can get you a cash offer with a quick closing, what sales price would make you happy? I phrase that kind of weird, but essentially you got to ask for a number in the initial phone conversation. And we're getting into the art of the negotiation. And in my opinion, the first part of the negotiations happen long before you submit your offer. When you think about negotiations, you think about a back and forth exchange between two different parties. I think the negotiations truly starts with the information that you present in your initial phone call. I think the negotiations start in your initial introduction when you meet the people face to face or whoever their contact is. You know, proving your worth and trying to show that you're not necessarily there to take advantage of them, which especially on the investment side of the real estate game, you have to overcome some of that, right? There's a little bit of a mindset of, oh, you're here to take advantage of me. And your job as a professional real estate investor, whether you're licensed or not, or whatever profession you're in, is to show them that you are professional. And we're not there to take advantage of them. It's very unlikely that you buy that house from that individual if they think that you're doing something malicious, sort of thing. So starting the negotiations with the introduction, with the phone conversation, with meeting them in person, that's when the negotiations truly start. I do think it's really important you know the numbers. And this is also a completely different conversation, educational topic. Understanding rehabs, understanding values. So if you're not a realtor, get your real estate license or get with the realtor you know and utilize your network. If you're not familiar with rehab numbers, go to Home Depot and price stuff out. Meet with contractors, see bids, learn what labor and material costs. Walk the property with the homeowner if at all possible to ask questions about previous repairs or items that they know are in need of repair. You know, also a completely different conversation when we talk about blind offering and just contracting something and hoping that we can sell it to somebody else. There's not very many investors that are just blindly offering on something, but they got the information from the phone and have done no due diligence. You know, I'm sure those people are out there that don't care that much about their money, but I care that much about my money, so I'm very, very rarely going to be submitting an offer to close a property with my name on it. My name is kind of all that I have, right? So I'm very rarely going to be in that position or put myself in that position. So walk the property, get in front of the homeowner or whoever their representative is. If at all possible, to ask questions about previous repairs or items that they know are in need of repair. Ask them if they had any or all of those items bid out from a contractor. You know, oftentimes a homeowner knows that there's a leak in the roof because there's water coming down, right? You're very likely to get a roof bid in that scenario. So ask them for the roof bid, ask them what the numbers came out. It's also very likely as a homeowner that they don't have the network that you do as a real estate investor. So their roof bid at $15,000 might be your roof bid at $8,500, right? Because you're connected with it. If the answer is yes, ask them to see those numbers. If the answer is no, realize that you are a professional and they're now relying on you to kind of give them some general information about what those repairs might cost. Point out necessary repairs to get the house to qualify for conventional loan. And what ancillary repairs will be necessary because of the major loans. That's something every investor deals with, whether they're like, or not. You buy a house, you start to do the rehab, you're like, God dang it, God, I'm gonna have to do this because I did that, right? You think, oh, I'm gonna take out this appliance and move it over here, but then you realize that you're gonna have to add more cabinetry to make up for where you remove the appliance and the cabinetry is not gonna match. Now I gotta get a whole kitchen. Right, that's simple stuff that you should think about ahead of time, but I promise, simple stuff will slip through the cracks. Point out the necessary repairs to get the house to qualify for a conventional loan and what ancillary repairs will be needed after that. By discussing the necessary repairs with the seller, you allow them to acknowledge that they can't get full market value. It's important that the seller acknowledges those big ticket items, right? Bob, you see that, you see this big crack over here above the window and above the door jamb. You realize there's a little bit of foundation problems, right? You have a bid for it? Oh, no, no, well, it's probably, we typically get our piers done for around, throw out a number, $200 a pier. We're gonna have to build piers here to fix this, so it's gonna cost us probably about this much money. Maybe you're not divulging exactly how much you think it's gonna cost, but giving them a general idea. And when they start to acknowledge these repairs in their head, they're decreasing their price at the same time. Yes, it needs a countertops. Yes, it needs foundation. Yes, it needs a new roof. They're deducting from that price. And then most individuals realize that investors can't buy a house for 150,000, put in 50,000, sell it for 200. They're losing 10%. That's not how this works. So as an investor, because this house doesn't qualify for conventional lending, we need some equity in there as well to make this a successful cash flow rental property, asset rental property, whatever extra you. By discussing the necessary repairs, they're acknowledging the reduction of the price. When they acknowledge they aren't getting full market value, they are starting to entertain the idea of a lower investor number in the mind if they weren't already. That's maybe more so the case on a cold call, reaching out to an individual, most likely an investor who called you, or seller who called you probably has a good idea. Overly simple concept again, but submitting your offer, giving them an offer at the property. If you want them to sign off on the offer, like in the history of me buying houses, 1,000+ transactions I've done, I've never done a deal without them signing a contract. Never. Like, never. Unbelievable. So maybe that first domino that we're hitting is submitting that contract, that offer to them, showing it to them, walking them through it at the property. Plus, you never know. There's a bunch of hustlers in here. Someone can come in right behind you and have the contract and get the deal done. It's happened to me more times than I like to think. It seems simple, but most beginning real estate investors are hesitant to make the offer. It's a formula. It's not rocket science, just to make the offer. Explain the reason for the offer, explain the ARV, the after repair value, what the repairs would be to justify your number. Here's a general pitch and how I present it. Well, Mr. Seller, based on the comparables in the neighborhood, we believe your house is worth $250,000, and that's completely remodeled. And to completely remodel this property with the foundation work and all the cosmetics and replacing this roof that we talked about before, that puts my cash offer to you at $120,000 cash as is. Acknowledge the numbers that I said were 250 to 120. Some of you might think that that's crazy low, or some of you might think it's not low enough. Regardless, it's off of what the property is actually worth. It's important again to kind of shut your mouth and wait for a response. See what their reaction is going to be. Because ideally, you're in front of the seller to gauge their reaction. If not, if it is over the phone because they live somewhere else, you're still listening to see what their response might be. And say another word, don't respond. Don't say another word until they respond. Gauge their reaction to the offer. If they immediately say they need a higher number, you have some work to do to show them why your offer makes more sense, right? Maybe it is explaining the hey, an investor needs equity too. It's not just, hey, it needs 50K worth. So I can buy it 50 grand under what it's worth. You know, that's something that we just put it out like a project model. If they immediately say no, now's the time to start to give them some other referrals in your network to help them find another solution. Okay. Maybe the house is beautiful, you have no shot at buying it, we're not that motivated. You want to go walk it anyways, because you never know, you're gonna snip the offer. You can still be of value to these people, and you never know what might come from it. I always submit the offer, but I'm always quick to say, hey, I tell you what, why don't I refer you to Ozzie over here and get this your property with this problem. Right. It's important to note again that you can't help everybody, but problem is real. So do your best to help the individual out of their situation by referring people in your network. If they say, let me speak with my wife, husband, or family member, I'll get back to you, which is a very common response, right? That's an easy way to not have to make a decision right now. Hey, let me get back to you. Let me think on it tonight. It's not necessarily a loss, but you do have a chance. When I walk away from that scenario, I feel pretty good about it because I think I'm a pro. I think I presented myself the right way. I think I educated them on this process the right way. And it's an investor number. Very rarely am I making $1 million in a transaction. Right? We're offering an investor price point. It's realistic for an investor. Could it be a little bit more? Sure. Could it be a little bit less? Yeah. But the number that I'm submitting makes sense. So I feel confident in my numbers and what I put together. So if they tell me they're going to think about it, I still feel pretty good about the situation. But be sure that they have the ability to sign a contract if they decide. This can go both ways. You hate to leave a contract with somebody, and then somebody else comes in right behind you and then use that contract signed for $1 more, right? The price is right. But I found that if I built the rapport the right way, I'm going to get a chance, even if they offered $1 more the next guy that came through, because I educated them the right way. I was professional in the way I handled the entirety of the conversations. I think that I'll get a chance to beat that other offer if need be. Or I'm just offering the right number and I'm not going to go. It could be that simple too.
Rick, do you think you're changing your script when you know there's multiple offers on the table?
I'm probably emphasizing why my number makes sense. But in the end, it's hard to tell somebody not to make more money. Make more money. Mr. Seller, you should take the best, you should take the highest offer. Here's why I think mine is still very, very competitive. But if your goal, if your end result is to take home the most amount of money and sell it for the highest dollar amount, go with the higher offer. Be surprised how often the feedback is positive when you tell somebody not to sell your house. That's a crazy thought. Yeah, I spent all this time, all this effort, all this marketing to get this opportunity, but you know, realistically, you should sell to somebody else. I've never had somebody curse me out for telling them, hey, they shouldn't sell it to me. Or me telling them they shouldn't sell it to me. But they tend to respect it. They tend to think, once again, I'm trying to prove my worth, overcome the stigma of what the real estate investor can be. By showing them, I'm not here to take advantage of you. You should take that higher offer. If it's better for you and your family, take that higher offer. And here's why my offer, I believe, is very strong and the selling points of my offer. But if it's not right, take that higher offer. And then the second something starts to change with that other offer, I want to call, right? They start to crawfish on you a little bit. They start to renegotiate a little bit. They don't submit their earnest money on time. They don't hit the close date. I need a phone call and I'll be right there because I'm not going anywhere, right? So I'm professional. I've already proved all that with how I presented myself in the initial phone conversation and the initial introduction, basically this. So I think that there probably is a variance. And if I was super good at sales and very salesy, I'm sure there's something else that I could say there to hammer something home. That's not the way I do it. But I would say, if anything, being sure they understand the entirety of your offer. You know, especially if you're a licensed real estate agent using a track contract, I think that holds a lot of validity. Just being professional. All right. So if they're asking to take a little bit of time, be sure they have the ability to sign the contract. I still, you know, if there was a salesy tactic that I use, it's assuming the sale instead of the offer, assuming I'm just gonna sign it. You'd be surprised how many people do because of the report that you put. But if they're thinking about it, now you have to further sell yourself until you get the response, whether it's yes or no. Sometimes it's necessary to set a deadline. Right, because, you know, I'm not going anywhere. It's important. One of my sales pitches is, yeah, my office down the street, I'm not going anywhere. It's all I do for a living. Been doing this for a long time. You can call me anytime. However, I do need to get my cash set aside. We have X amount of closings this month. I need to get this dollar amount set aside in cash for this closing, because it's based on our contract and offer estimate, it's 10 days from now. I gotta set that money aside or decide to put that money to work in a different way. So setting a deadline doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. It's all how you phrase it. Now, if they say yes, better have a contract ready for them to sign. Now, most of us have the ability, especially with realtors and most wholesale outfits have the ability to send their the contract to sign digitally. Still a big believer in wet signing a contract. If you're right in front of the person, there's nothing like it. So maybe know the contract. If you're going to do that, so you look professional, but there's also individuals that don't necessarily either know how or want to use technology to sign contracts. So having a contract that could be wet signed is pretty important, in my opinion. But obviously take advantage of it now. It's also happened to me. And this almost happened to me again today, where I submitted an offer, had a verbal agreement, turn around and find out we're gonna get in a highest and best situation with another individual. And it's because they didn't have that contract for them to sign right there. Now, they had it very quickly after. But you know, I had the yes, I had what I was looking for, and then something else took place. So be sure that you get it signed as quickly as possible. Assuming you don't get a signed contract at the house, now is where the second half of the negotiations start. And it's funny because this is the last part of my little spiel here. It's by far the shortest part. Because my negotiations started the second I took that phone call, the second I made that phone call, the second I met that individual in person. The negotiations back and forth coming to a dollar amount. You know, there's plenty of people, and I'm sure people in this room have bought houses for people where the number didn't really matter. It's because they identified with you. You know, you're a professional and you handled yourself appropriately. You weren't trying to take advantage of them. They're just ready to sell, right? So the back and forth negotiations is also maybe a completely different topic that I'll leave for another speaker. But anyways, the first part of the negotiations are taking place when they're building credibility and rapport with the seller at the house or over the phone on the initial phone call. It's important to rely on your numbers and know what your highest investment is. You know, I do think it's important to acknowledge your top number and realize where you're at offer wise as you're doing your negotiations. If you're in a competition, it might be advantageous to be pretty aggressive and pay the number that gets the deal for you. On the other side, if you're not in love with the property for one reason or another, stick to your guns and rely on your numbers and stay with your original offer. Right? I'm a big believer in the number that I submit, the number that I want to close. I'm not necessarily one of those guys that wants to contract something and just renegotiate it and hope that we get it done. I want my initial number to make a lot of sense for both parties. So I like to stick with that original number, and I'm not trying to renegotiate. There's a reason and there's a time and place to renegotiate. It's not like I've never done it before, but my initial number that I submit should be the number that I'm willing to close it at. And then some other simple stuff, learn a bunch of different negotiation tactics. Most negotiations tend to meet in the middle. I know there's books, I never meet in the middle, but there's a bunch of negotiation books out there to read. So read as many as you can, educate yourself. And again, it's important to still realize that you might not be the best solution for the seller and be able to use your network to help them get to a solution. You never know what good might come from not buying a house the right way. And that's all I got.
Awesome. Anybody have any questions? Perfect. I actually have a couple. So this is a question that gets asked a lot. We get a lot of people that want to get into wholesaling,
Sure.
that want to get into that aspect of the real estate investment world.
Mhm.
And typically a lot of them end up not being licensed. Now, approaching a seller, let's say on the phone, and this is a question we get a lot in here as far as how do you approach the question? Not just take take the fact that you're licensed out of the equation, and then also the fact that you're not the end buyer, you're a wholesaler, right? Dealing with assignment of contracts and such. How do you handle that question of being, what are you the one that's actually going to buy my house?
Right.
And having to basically at that, we've had wholesalers that basically blatantly, in a sense, I guess you could say, are dishonest with them and say that they're gonna buy it and not buy it, right? So how do you approach that conversation?
I'm a fan of being overly transparent in that
Mhm.
scenario. I think that's the way to build that rapport.
Right.
Show that you're not just trying to take advantage of the situation.
Mhm.
Once again, if you're able to help somebody out, it's a win-win for both parties. Make it happen. I do think there's some value in being transparent there and explaining the process and what you're doing and what your part is there, because you are trying to make it, they still have to agree to it, right? So, if they're willing to agree to that scenario, then you put yourself in a really good spot to have some success and get a chance.
Awesome. And we do have one on Zoom. They just asked, which contract are you using to fill out with most of the sellers you do?
Every single contract that I've ever submitted has been a Texas real estate contract.
1 to 4, right?
Wonderful. And it just updated last week.
Yep.
To be sure you have the most updated version. Also recommend reviewing it, maybe sitting down with the real estate agent if you've never done it before,
Mhm.
to understand all of that. And then I'm sure there's a bunch of attorneys out there you can reach out to have your contracts strong. There's a reason why realtors, investors use the Texas real estate contracts, is it not only protects the seller, it protects the buyer as well.
Mhm. And then just another one. So being an investor, do you recommend getting licensed, or how do you feel about the other?
Common question. I tell everybody to get their license. If you're interested in something, why not be a professional at it?
Mhm.
It's not overly expensive. It's not overly complicated to become an investor. I've been doing this for a long time, but that real estate testing and all that part, right? I'm probably not the smartest guy in this room, but if you can pass that real estate test. And it just, to me, it looks good on a business card. If nothing else, in building that credibility and being able to hand off that business card with your license number, I can go a really long way. I'm sure that there's some people that will argue the other side of that. However, in my experience, it has been a much easier process with a much higher likelihood of closing when I'm dealing with licensing.
Mhm. Awesome. And last but not least, just for our viewers here, do you mind giving your name and phone and contact information possibly, if anyone has any questions?
It's everywhere, so I'm sure you could probably give it a Google. And you can't see this business card, but my name is Ricky Sparks, and my cell phone number is 713-366-9727. Got an email address that's as long as possible. It's Rick. Yeah, we have a stack of business cards over here. You can grab one, but it's Rick at networkrealtyusa.com. Yes, sir.
I have a question for you. So whenever you get a lead that comes through your desk and you got all the information, whether it's probate, back taxes, mostly probates, definitely family, do you already have all that information to know what's going to be needed in order to get this clear title?
No.
Before you go sign a contract, you have someone like an in-house title person who's already actually like a commitment saying, this is what needs to be cleared in order for us to go sign a contract. Or you sign the contract and then you take care of all those things.
So it would be great to have all that information ahead of time, right? And if you have the title, an escrow officer on your team that can pull all that information for you, then that would be a huge benefit to not wasting your time. However, I'm more the adage of get it under contract and then let's let the title companies do their thing and work it out. I mean, we just closed the deal, I think it was 2 weeks ago, where we had been under contract for over a year for title issues. And I'm okay to wait, right? With the way our business model works, we're not going anywhere, so we're good to wait. And I guess what I'd appreciate it over the years, so it's still okay. But, for all intents and purposes, if time is of the essence, you would like to know that you're not wasting time and you have the ability to buy that house, and maybe more importantly, that the seller has the ability to sell that house, right? But that's the title company's job, so I tend to contract it, get it to title, let them go to work, and I move on to the next transaction.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So what do you do in that situation, like, if you're doing the 1 to 4 family, and like it goes over that option period? I mean, how do you make that stay alive that long, like over a year?
We'll extend the contract.
Oh, you just keep on
We
extending?
just keep on extending the contract. And, obviously, we don't make money until we close the transaction, so we're encouraged to close it as quickly as possible. But we can get a gauge pretty quickly through the title and through the sellers. Is this gonna happen quickly or not? So our first thought might be, hey, it's not closing today, let's extend it to next Friday. If that doesn't look good, let's extend it a month. If that doesn't look good, hey, this is a crapshoot, let's extend it 3 months and touch base right before. But once again, in over explaining, being over transparent, I want to be sure I do it the right way. So we're gonna stay in contract to be sure we're both being taken care of appropriately. So we'll submit an extension that entire process. But then, the contract says on it before, right? So if we put the close date for the end of December, right now, we can still close it tomorrow.
And has there ever been one where you just backed out, like you decided, I don't know.
Due to title issues,
Yeah,
sure, it's happened, but it's because the title issues were not curable,
right.
right?
And so what protected you there? The option, or like, how'd you get out of it, or what'd you tell the seller?
Yeah, the seller doesn't have the ability to deliver cleaning through the
So
title.
then you're just.
So you're obligated to your earnest money back. Now, both parties still have to sign up on that release, which can be a point of contention in certain scenarios. However, legally, contractually, you have the right to get that money back. So it would be a matter of getting the seller to sign off on it. Because it's not theirs, right? Because it comes to the title company. So
Right.
if we submitted a $5,000 earnest money to purchase this property, it's not in the seller's pocket. And the way it works today, even option money goes to the title company, so you're not out that. That used to be a problem a long time ago, is people would just pocket that option money the wrong way, you never hear from them again.
Yeah.
And you struggle to get the release signed on to get the earnest money back to the title company, but if you're doing it the right way and you explain yourself appropriately from the jump, I think that there's a very good likelihood that you get that money back when it sounds off.
Okay. And one more thing.
Yeah.
Have you ever had anything like you explain to the seller, I'm gonna sign it, I'm gonna get you what you need, and you're gonna vet it your other people that your contacts.
Yeah.
And say you can't, say nobody wants it, what do you do in that situation?
So I've been doing this for 16 years. I've never signed a contract. We close on everything.
Okay.
So I'm maybe not the expert to be asking that particular question.
Okay.
However, if I was a wholesaler, I've educated a ton of wholesalers, right? And individuals who are just getting into it, people with experience that we'd like to do more business with and our processes. So I have no problem explaining it all. But I tend to tell them not to contract something that's not a deal. I know that it's too sensible, but contract something that's a deal.
Right.
Right. In the end, your name, and look, everyone makes mistakes. That's gonna happen. But don't contract it knowing that it's a mistake. That's a mistake, right? And that can impact you. And then there's the legal ramifications of not performing on the contract. And that's a whole different conversation. So I guess my words of wisdom there is submit the offer that is a deal that that you can sell, or in my scenario, the number that I know I will close on the property. Right.
Gotcha.
And so I own quite a few rentals that I closed on that I didn't want to own. But I said I was gonna close on it and I did.
Yeah.
And so once again, it all comes back around eventually, and I'm not afraid to tell people, hey, here's this deal that I did it anyways. If you got somebody else that wants to sell, please let me know so I can try to listen to them.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Great advice.
Yeah,
Thank you.
there you go.
I have a bit more of a personal question.
Sure.
You said you've been doing this for 16 years, like over 40 investment properties. What got you started?
When I graduated, I went to a career fair at A&M, and this company pulled me aside, and I had no idea what it was. I knew there was money in real estate. You know, got set on hours, it was either this or alcohol sales, and I was like, oh man, I should probably make the right decision and go real estate and not sell wine on the side. Right. And I'm glad I did. It turned out to be a great decision. I've always been a fan of kind of reading what you say. I mean, you can really say it's a way to look at it, but you get what you put in, right?
Mm.
And this is truly that. And real estate is high ticket commissions. It's not selling knives. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's not selling Cutco knives. It's high ticket commission items, and so it can be very, very lucrative. And then fast forward to where I am now, maybe starting like 5 or 6 years into my career. When you build it the right way, you build your network the right way, if your name means something, the job is a lot of fun. It's really easy, right? Like I'm sure a lot of y'all know Ozzie, and there's a reason why Ozzie has a good name, right? People say to reach out to him. When you build it the right way, the job gets pretty easy. It's a lot of fun, and you can do it almost anywhere.
Mhm.
It's a great choice if you can make it work, but it's not necessarily easy from the get-go. It takes a lot of time and effort, but if you can hang in there. And I've seen people that have no clue what they're doing, become successful at this, so stick it out.
And I have a fellow agent asking this question. It says, do you ever run a CMA and share it with the seller?
I have zero issue doing that.
Mhm.
You know, I know Home Investors was really good at this for a long time and putting together a whole bit of information to present.
Mhm.
If that's what the seller needs, then that's what I'm doing.
Mhm.
A lot of the sellers are pretty savvy today. You know, it's not like 20 years ago when you couldn't look up the property value, but everybody can Google it and look through it. And are such an amazing mobile app, even for the consumer, they can have a good idea of what the property is worth. I do use it when there could be an issue with something that maybe they're not looking at, right? Maybe their house is in a flood zone, but these other properties in the subdivision weren't in a flood zone. I'll highlight that through the CMA. Or maybe if their house has an addition and it's not legitimate original square footage, let's say it's maybe not fully done, I'll highlight original legit square footage in the CMA as opposed to the additional square footage that maybe is in disrepair. So I definitely think that there's a time and place, but I think a lot of sellers today are doing that. Awesome.
Well, thank you so much, man. Any more questions before we close out?
I have one more.
Yep.
So have you had experience where there's a seller, or say it's brothers and sisters, like maybe 5 or 7 brothers and sisters trying to sell their child at home because the parents are deceased? How do you deal with that type of situation where it's more than one seller? It's like 7 people.
Takes time, right?
Yeah.
And so it depends on if there was a will and if it was probated and if it's just gonna be airships.
Okay.
Airships get a little bit hairy. Especially if any of the heirs have passed away and then their kids have the opportunity to be an heir, it can get complicated. However, that's the title company's job. That's what they get paid for. Treat your title companies right. Don't give them 500 of those scenarios because they don't like you very much, but it is their job to go out there and clear up that title. I've never been the guy that's like hustling around trying to get signatures from everybody. I tend to let the title company do it. However, if you know what you're doing, there's a bunch of great wholesalers out there that are good at that. And they go hustle and go find these heirs and go to the prisons and go to the hospital and go to the kid graduating from high school today to get the signatures on the benefit affidavits. You can make a lot of money. But I tend to ask that question ahead of time too. And then we kind of start to solve the problem as we're getting the deal done and setting the expectation. What can be difficult for people is when you kind of blindside them with something that they weren't expecting. So if you can ask the right questions and be knowledgeable about it, how the process should be handled, explaining that the layers without favors will have to be signed, or explaining that they need to present that probated will to the title company. It tends to make the future conversations on what you do a lot.
Perfect, thank you.
Awesome, guys. Well, give it up for Rick. So this next hour, guys, it's just to get with people you want to get with. And Ozzie wasn't here yet. He said he was gonna be here at 7:30, but he typically likes to do this part. I was gonna let him do this part, but he's not here yet. But we have a lot of new faces in here, and this is kind of we just like to point someone out and just see, what are you doing? What is it that you're looking for, and how can we help you? So I'm gonna ask one of the network guys in here, green shirt. I'm gonna ask one of y'all to talk for a second.
Basically, investment fund, right? We buy and sell investment properties that with investors. Typically, we like to do one-stop shop, service better for the investors. So we go out there, find the houses, knock on doors, talk to, neighbors. We're also a hardline lender, so we can, finance these deals for them. We have a, whole network of contractors that we can go out to too, so, we like to include, one-stop shop for the investors. Where do you go to guys?
Which office are you working on?
All of us are in our League City office, but we have a Heights location and a Woodlands location.
Awesome. Thank you. Calling on you, man.
So, my name is Carlos. I'm with Right Way, same as Network. We're a wholesale company. We buy and sell investment properties. We also have in-house lending and contractors networking.
Awesome. Well, y'all have a lot of people in here to talk to. Let's get to know each other. And there's still a lot of sandwiches, so we can break bread and all talk. Thank you for everybody that came in Zoom. We will see y'all next month.